Clean it. Now. The words hit the room before the sound of the keys did, metal clinking against the polished floor just inches from Marcus Reed's boots. No one moved. Then the laughter came, low at first, then spreading, filling the precinct like something sour. Marcus looked down, not at the keys, but at the reflection staring back at him in the tile, fluorescent lights slicing across his face, steady, unreadable. He could feel every eye on him, waiting, measuring, deciding who he was allowed to be. What's the matter? Officer Daniel Hayes leaned back against the desk, arms crossed, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. Too good for simple orders? The air felt colder than it should have. Marcus exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that didn't shake, didn't betray anything. Then he bent down. One knee touched the floor. The room went quiet again, not out of respect, but anticipation. His fingers closed around the keys, cool and solid, grounding. For a second, just a second, his hand stayed there. Still, not frozen. Choosing. Somewhere behind him, a chair creaked. Someone whispered, barely audible. Told you. Marcus stood. Smooth. Controlled. He didn't rush. Didn't look angry. Didn't look anything at all. He walked 2 steps forward and placed the keys gently on the desk beside Daniel's hand. Not into it. Beside it. A small difference. But in a room like this, it echoed. Daniel's smile tightened. You following instructions now? He said, voice sharper. Marcus met his eyes for the first time. Calm. Direct. I picked them up, he said quietly. No more. No less. A pause stretched between them, thin and electric. Then someone laughed again, louder this time, breaking the tension like glass. Man thinks he's different, another officer muttered. Marcus didn't respond. He stepped back, shoulders squared, hands relaxed at his sides. The kind of posture that didn't ask for space, but took it anyway. Across the room, an older officer glanced down at a clipboard, flipping a page, then stopping. His brow furrowed slightly, like something didn't add up. But he said nothing. Not yet. The moment passed. Just another shift. Just another rookie learning his place. Or at least, that's what they thought. Marcus turned slightly, his gaze drifting for half a second toward the locker room hallway, where his phone sat tucked inside his jacket pocket. Silent. Unchecked. An unread message waiting. He could feel it without seeing it. The weight of it. The timing of it. But he didn't move toward it. Not yet. Instead, he looked back at the room, at the laughter, the casual dismissals, the way they had already decided his story before he ever spoke a word. His jaw tightened, just barely. Then it relaxed again. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder, then fading, like a reminder that something bigger was always just out of frame. Marcus adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, precise, deliberate. And in that small, almost invisible motion, there was something else. Not submission. Not anger. Something quieter. Something patient. Like a man who knew exactly where he stood, even if no one else in that room did. You ever write a report before, rookie, or you just stand around looking composed? Daniel's voice cut through the low hum of the precinct, sharper now, like he was testing how far he could push without breaking the surface. Marcus did not answer right away. The bullpen smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink, the overhead lights buzzing just enough to make silence feel louder than it was. He stepped toward the terminal, fingers brushing the edge of the desk before sitting down, posture straight, movements measured. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale glow across his face. Around him, chairs rolled, keyboards tapped, conversations resumed in half-whispers that were not meant to be quiet. Careful, someone muttered behind him, not even bothering to lower his voice enough. We do not want him overthinking it. A few chuckles followed. Marcus logged in without hesitation, eyes scanning the interface like it was something familiar, something he had done 100 times before. The cursor blinked. Waiting. He began typing. Steady. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Across the room, Daniel watched, leaning against the same desk as before, but his expression had shifted just slightly. Not respect. Not yet. But curiosity had slipped in where certainty used to sit. Sergeant Cole Briggs walked in from the hallway, adjusting his duty belt, his presence heavier, more deliberate. Conversations dimmed a fraction. Authority moved with him, unspoken but understood. He stopped near Marcus's station, glancing at the screen without asking permission. You know the format? Briggs asked, Tone neutral, but not kind. Marcus kept typing for another second before answering, his voice even. Yes, sir. Briggs's eyes lingered on the report, scanning faster than most could read, then narrowing just a touch. Huh. It was quiet. Almost nothing. But it hung in the air longer than expected. Daniel pushed off the desk, stepping closer. What? He asked. Briggs did not respond immediately. He just kept looking, then reached out and tapped the screen lightly with one finger. You referenced case law, he said, almost to himself. Marcus paused his typing, just long enough to acknowledge the statement, then continued. It applies, he said. No pride. No explanation. Just fact. Another silence. Thicker this time. Somewhere in the back, a radio crackled with a routine dispatch call, the voice distorted but steady, grounding the moment before it could stretch too far. Daniel exhaled through his nose, forcing a small laugh. Lucky guess, he said, though it did not land the way he wanted it to. Marcus finished the last line, hit save, and closed the report. The soft click of the keyboard sounded louder than it should have. He stood, adjusting his sleeves again, that same precise motion from before. Briggs straightened, eyes still on him, something unreadable settling behind them. Not suspicion, not approval, something in between. Where did you train? Briggs asked, the question coming out before he seemed to decide to ask it. Marcus met his gaze, calm as ever. Around, he replied. It was not evasive. It was contained. Daniel scoffed lightly, shaking his head. Figures. But this time, no one laughed. The room had shifted, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Marcus turned slightly, his eyes drifting once more toward the hallway where his jacket waited. The phone inside remained silent to everyone else. But to him, it was louder now, like a clock ticking towards something inevitable. He did not check it. Not yet. Instead, he stepped away from the desk, moving with the same quiet certainty that had unsettled them from the moment he walked in. Behind him, Briggs looked back at the screen one more time, then at Daniel, then back at Marcus's retreating figure. And for the first time, the question was no longer who Marcus Reed thought he was. It was whether they had been wrong about him from the start. You missed a spot. The words came from behind him, casual, almost lazy, but sharp enough to land. Marcus stopped mid-step near the hallway, his hand just inches from the handle of his locker. He did not turn immediately. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then steadied, casting long reflections across the polished floor. He adjusted his sleeve again, that same precise motion, then slowly looked over his shoulder. Daniel stood a few feet away, arms crossed, chin slightly raised like he had found something to hold on to again. Report looked clean, Daniel added, walking closer, boots echoing softly with each step, but clean is not the same as right. The hallway felt narrower now, quieter than the bullpen, like sound itself had been filtered down to only what mattered. Marcus faced him fully, posture straight, eyes calm. Then show me what is wrong, he said. No edge, no challenge, just a statement. Daniel paused, just for a fraction of a second too long, then shrugged, masking it with a small smirk. You will figure it out, he replied. That is what rookies do. Another beat of silence. Marcus nodded once, subtle, almost imperceptible, then turned back to his locker and opened it. Inside, everything was arranged with quiet order. Uniform pressed, notes stacked, and his phone, resting face down on the top shelf. He picked it up. The screen lit instantly. One unread message. The sender, Internal Affairs Division. The subject line was short. Assignment confirmation. Marcus's thumb hovered over it, not touching, not opening. Behind him, Daniel lingered for a moment longer, watching, trying to read something that refused to be read. You always this calm? Daniel asked, tone softer now, but not friendlier. Marcus did not look back. It helps, he said. Simple. Honest. He flipped the phone over, screen dark again, and slipped it into his pocket without opening the message. Not yet. Footsteps approached from the bullpen. Briggs again. Slower this time. More deliberate. He stopped at the edge of the hallway, eyes moving from Daniel to Marcus, then settling on Marcus with a weight that had shifted since earlier. Dispatch, just updated, Briggs said. We have a call a few blocks out. Disturbance. Nothing major. Daniel straightened slightly, tension returning to his shoulders like it had never left. We will take it, he said quickly, almost too quickly. Briggs nodded once, then looked at Marcus. You are riding along, he said. Not a question. Marcus closed his locker gently, the soft click echoing in the narrow space. Yes, sir. As they walked back toward the bullpen, the noise returned gradually, like stepping back into a current. Radios crackled. Chairs rolled. Voices overlapped. But something underneath it all had changed. Subtle. Hard to name. Daniel grabbed his keys from the desk, spinning them once around his finger before heading toward the exit. Marcus followed a step behind, steady, measured. As they reached the door, Daniel pushed it open, cool air from outside slipping in, carrying the distant hum of the city. He glanced back briefly. Try to keep up, he said. Marcus met his eyes for just a second. Calm. Unshaken. I will, he replied. And as they stepped out into the fading afternoon light, neither of them noticed the older officer at the far desk quietly pulling up Marcus Reed's personnel file again, his brow tightening just a little more as he read the line that should not have been there, the line that did not match the man they thought they understood. Do not touch anything until I tell you, Daniel said as the cruiser door shut with a heavy thud, the sound sealing the space between them. The engine rumbled to life, low and steady, vibrations humming through the seats as they pulled out of the lot. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, posture upright, hands resting loosely on his thighs, eyes forward. The city moved around them in long stretches of concrete and glass, late afternoon light reflecting off windshields and storefront windows. Sirens were not on. No rush. Just motion. You listen first, Daniel continued, glancing sideways for half a second before returning his eyes to the road. That is how you learn out here. Marcus nodded once. Understood. His voice was even, unforced. The radio crackled softly between them, dispatch repeating the call details in clipped, practiced tones. A disturbance. Residential. Neighbors complaining about noise, raised voices, nothing more. Routine. Daniel exhaled through his nose, tapping the steering wheel twice with his fingers, like he needed to fill the silence with something. Most of this job, he said, is knowing who you are dealing with before you even step out of the car. Marcus turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge the statement. And if you are wrong, he asked. Daniel smirked faintly. Then you learn fast. The cruiser slowed as they turned onto a quieter street, lined with small houses, porches close to the sidewalk, windows half open to let in the cooling air. A few people stood outside, watching as the car rolled in, their conversations dropping to murmurs. Observation. Always observation. Daniel parked along the curb, engine idling for a second before he shut it off. The sudden quiet inside the car felt heavier than the noise before it. Stay close, Daniel said, already reaching for the door. And do not get ahead of yourself. Marcus stepped out a second later, the air outside warmer, carrying faint traces of cut grass and distant traffic. The world felt wider out here, less controlled than the walls of the precinct, but the tension followed them just the same. They walked up the short path toward the house, voices audible now, sharp but not out of control. A man stood near the doorway, pacing, hands moving as he spoke. Another figure inside, partially obscured, responding with equal intensity. Daniel slowed his pace just slightly, reading the scene, building his version of it before stepping in. Marcus noticed, not the conclusion, but the process. The assumption forming before the facts. He stayed a step behind, exactly where Daniel expected him to be. Sir, Daniel called out, voice firm but measured. We are here to make sure everything is all right. The man turned, frustration written across his face, but not directed at them. Not yet. Words spilled quickly, explaining, overlapping, pointing back toward the house. Marcus listened. Really listened. Not just to what was said, but how it was said. The rhythm. The pauses. The parts that did not match the tone Daniel was already preparing to respond with. Daniel nodded, already shaping his reply, stepping forward with that same confidence he carried inside the precinct. Marcus's eyes shifted briefly, catching movement inside the house, a small detail most would miss. A child, sitting quietly on the stairs, watching everything unfold with wide, uncertain eyes. The kind of detail that changed the weight of the moment, if you let it. Marcus took one small step to the side, adjusting his angle, his presence subtle but intentional. Daniel did not notice. Not yet. The conversation continued, voices rising and falling, tension stretching but not breaking. And in the space between what was being said and what was being understood, Marcus stood still, calm, patient, like he was waiting for something to reveal itself. Not forcing it, not rushing it, just watching. Because sometimes, the truth did not need to be chased. It just needed someone willing to see it. Sir, I just need you to slow down for a second, Daniel said, his voice tightening as the man kept talking over him, hands moving faster now, frustration spilling into the air like heat off pavement. The front porch creaked under shifting weight, the late sun casting long shadows across the narrow steps. Marcus stayed a half step back, eyes moving between the man, the doorway, and the small figure inside. The child had not moved, still sitting on the stairs, still watching. He is not listening, the man said, voice raised but not aggressive, just tired, stretched thin. I have been trying to explain, and I am trying to help you. Daniel cut in, sharper now, stepping closer, his presence filling the space like it always did when control started slipping. Marcus noticed the shift immediately, not in volume, in tone, the kind that made people stop hearing and start reacting. He turned his head slightly, catching the woman inside the house now, her arms crossed, not defensive but guarded, like she was waiting for someone to actually understand what was happening instead of deciding it for her. The air felt heavier, thicker. Marcus stepped forward, just enough to be seen without interrupting. Can I ask one question? He said, voice calm, steady, cutting through the overlap without force. Daniel glanced sideways, a flicker of irritation crossing his face, but he did not stop him. Not yet. The man paused, breath catching, like someone had finally opened a door instead of pushing against it. What? Marcus nodded once toward the house, then toward the child. Has anyone been hurt? The question landed differently. Not accusatory, not assuming, just direct. The man shook his head quickly. No, no one is hurt. It is just, he hesitated, searching for the right word, noise. We argued. That is all. Marcus shifted his gaze to the woman inside. She met his eyes for a second, then nodded once. Small, but enough. Daniel exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction, though his expression stayed firm. Then we keep it down, he said, regaining control of the conversation, but the edge had dulled. Neighbors called. That means it crossed a line. The man nodded, slower now, calmer. I understand. The moment settled. Not resolved completely, but no longer escalating. Marcus took a small step back again, returning to his place, silent, observant. The child on the stairs relaxed slightly, shoulders lowering, eyes no longer as wide. A subtle shift. Easy to miss if you were not looking for it. Daniel turned, motioning back toward the cruiser. We are done here, he said. As they walked away, the gravel crunched softly under their boots, the sounds of the neighborhood returning in pieces, distant conversations, a car, door closing somewhere down the block. They reached the car, and Daniel stopped just before opening the door. He looked at Marcus, longer this time, measuring again, but differently. You got lucky, Daniel said, though his voice lacked conviction. Marcus met his gaze, calm as ever. I listened, he replied. A pause. Not long, but enough to sit between them. Daniel looked away first, pulling the door open with a sharper motion than necessary. Get in, he said. Marcus did. The engine started again, the low hum filling the space, but the silence between them had changed. It was no longer about proving something. It was about understanding something that had not been clear before. And as the cruiser pulled away from the curb, neither of them noticed the message still waiting on Marcus's phone, the one that had not been opened, the one that would change everything once it was. The cruiser moved through the city in steady silence, tires rolling over worn asphalt, the rhythm almost hypnotic, like the kind of quiet that comes after something unresolved. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, one hand resting on the wheel, the other tapping lightly against it again, slower this time, less certain. Marcus sat beside him, posture unchanged, gaze forward, but his attention was not on the traffic. It was on the pause between things, the space where people usually revealed more than they intended. You stepped him back there, Daniel said finally, not looking at him, voice neutral but edged with something harder to name. Not anger, not approval, something in between. Marcus nodded once. There was space to listen. Daniel let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it did not carry humor. Space, he repeated. Out here, space gets you in trouble. Marcus turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge the statement. So does assuming. Too fast. The words were quiet, but they landed. Daniel's fingers stopped tapping, just for a moment, then resumed, slower. The radio crackled again, dispatch calling out another update, routine, procedural, but neither of them responded right away. The cruiser passed through an intersection, sunlight cutting across the windshield in sharp lines, then fading as they moved under a row of trees. Shadows flickered across Marcus's face, light and dark in quick succession, like the moment itself could not decide what it wanted to be. Daniel adjusted his grip on the wheel. "You always talk like that?" he asked. Marcus's expression did not change. "Only when it matters." Another silence. Longer this time. Not empty. Just full of things neither of them said. The cruiser slowed as they approached a red light, the brake pressing gently, the car settling into stillness. Outside, pedestrians crossed, conversations drifting faintly through the glass, ordinary life continuing without noticing the shift happening inside the vehicle. Daniel glanced at Marcus, quick, almost involuntary. "You said you trained around," he said. "That does not mean anything." Marcus reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the phone for the first time since leaving the station. He did not take it out yet. Just felt it there. Solid. Present. "It means I have seen enough," he replied. Daniel frowned slightly, not satisfied, but not pushing further either. The light turned green. The car moved again. A few blocks later, Marcus finally pulled the phone out, the screen lighting up in the dim interior. The message was still there. Unopened. Assignment confirmation. Internal Affairs Division. Daniel's eyes flicked toward it, just for a second, catching the official header before Marcus tilted the screen away, not hiding it, just not offering it. "What is that?" Daniel asked, casual on the surface, but something underneath it had sharpened. Marcus looked at the message, then at the road ahead. His thumb hovered again, just like before. Then he locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Nothing for this moment," he said. Daniel did not respond immediately. The cruiser continued forward, but the air inside had shifted again, heavier now, like a question had been asked without being answered. Up ahead, the station came back into view, the familiar structure rising at the end of the street, windows reflecting the late afternoon light. As they pulled into the lot, the engine humming lower, winding down, Daniel finally spoke again, quieter than before. "You are not what I expected," he said. Marcus opened the door, stepping out into the cooling air, the faint scent of concrete and engine heat lingering around them. He paused for half a second, then looked back at Daniel, calm, steady. "Most people are not," he replied. And with that, he closed the door, the sound echoing just enough to leave something unfinished hanging in the space between them. The station door slid open with a soft mechanical hum, and the familiar scent of coffee and paper wrapped around them again. But something in the air had shifted, like the building itself was holding its breath. Marcus walked in first this time, not faster, not slower, just steady, his footsteps quiet against the polished floor. Conversations dipped for a second as a few heads turned, then resumed, but not quite the same. Not as dismissive, not as certain. Daniel followed a step behind, keys in hand, his usual confidence dulled just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Across the room, the older officer sat at his desk, the glow of his monitor reflecting in his glasses as he stared at something that had clearly stopped being routine a while ago. He looked up as Marcus entered, his gaze lingering longer than before, measuring, recalibrating. Marcus felt it, but did not acknowledge it. Not outwardly. He moved toward his station, hands relaxed, shoulders even, like nothing had changed at all. But the room knew better. "You back already?" someone called out, casual, but testing. Daniel answered before Marcus could. "Routine call," he said, tossing his keys onto the desk, the sound sharper than necessary. Nothing to write home about. A few nods. A few glances. But no laughter this time. Marcus sat down, the chair rolling slightly as he pulled it in, the screen in front of him still dark. He did not turn it on immediately. Instead, his hand slipped into his pocket again, fingers closing around the phone. The weight of the unread message felt different now. Not distant. Immediate. Around him, the rhythm of the precinct continued, keyboards tapping, radios murmuring, chairs shifting, but underneath it all, there was a thin line of attention drawn toward him, quiet but constant. Marcus pulled the phone out slowly, the screen lighting up once more. Assignment confirmation. Internal Affairs Division. His thumb hovered again, but this time, it did not stop. He tapped. The message opened. Words filled the screen in clean, official formatting, direct, and unmistakable. Effective immediately. Command authority granted. Report to station leadership upon arrival. Marcus read it once. Then again. Not because he needed to understand it, but because of the timing. The placement. The weight of it in this exact moment. Behind him, footsteps approached. Slow. Deliberate. Briggs. He stopped just off Marcus's shoulder, close enough to see the screen if he leaned in, but he did not. Not yet. Everything squared away. Briggs asked, voice controlled, but tighter than before. Marcus locked the screen, slipping the phone back into his pocket with a smooth motion. He stood, turning to face him fully. Yes, sir, he said. No hesitation. No reveal. Not yet. Briggs studied him, something sharper now behind his eyes, like pieces were starting to connect in ways he did not fully like. Across the room, Daniel leaned against the desk again, watching, arms crossed, but his posture was different. Less certain. The older officer finally stood from his chair, holding a printed sheet in his hand, his expression no longer neutral. He took one step forward, then another, eyes fixed on Marcus. The room began to quiet again, conversations fading one by one as attention shifted, drawn by something unspoken but undeniable. Marcus felt it. The change. The moment stretching towards something that could not be delayed much longer. He adjusted his sleeve once more, that same precise motion, then lifted his gaze, calm, steady, ready. Because some moments did not arrive with noise. They arrived like this. Quiet. Inevitable. And impossible to ignore. What is that in your hand? Briggs's voice cut through the room, not loud, but precise enough to stop everything else in its tracks. The older officer stood just a few feet away now, the printed sheet slightly trembling between his fingers, not from fear, but from the weight of what it carried. Conversations died mid-sentence. Chairs stopped moving. Even the low hum of the fluorescent lights seemed sharper in the silence. Marcus did not look at the paper. He looked at Briggs. Calm. Unshaken. Waiting. The older officer stepped forward, clearing his throat once, like he needed to reset something inside himself before speaking. I pulled your file, he said, voice slower. Now, each word placed carefully. Or at least, what I thought was your file. A faint shift moved through the room. Daniel straightened slightly, his arms uncrossing without him realizing it. Briggs's eyes narrowed just a fraction. There is a line in there. The older officer continued, lifting the paper slightly. That does not match anything else. He paused. Not for effect. For certainty. Then he read it. Command authority designation. Effective immediately. The words landed heavier than their volume. A ripple moved through the room, subtle but unmistakable. Someone shifted their weight. Someone else exhaled too quickly. Daniel's gaze snapped toward Marcus, searching, recalculating, trying to find the version of him that made sense again. Marcus did not move. Not yet. Briggs took one step closer, his presence firm, controlled, but no longer absolute. You want to explain that? He asked. The question was direct, but the edge had changed. It was no longer about control. It was about uncertainty. Marcus held his gaze for a second longer, then reached into his pocket. Slow. Deliberate. He pulled out his phone, the screen lighting up in the quiet, and this time, he did not hide it. He turned it slightly, just enough for Briggs to see. The official header. The seal. The same words. Effective immediately. Command authority granted. A breath caught somewhere in the room. Briggs's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. Not this time. Daniel took a step forward without realizing it, drawn in by something he could not yet accept. What is this? He asked, voice lower now, stripped of the earlier certainty. Marcus lowered the phone, locking the screen with a soft tap. The sound echoed more than it should have. He looked from Briggs to Daniel, then briefly across the room, taking in the faces that had laughed, questioned, dismissed. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just with clarity. It is timing, Marcus said quietly. No explanation. No defense. Just truth. Another silence fell, deeper than before, settling into the walls, into the desks, into the space between every person in the room. The older officer lowered the paper slowly, his expression no longer confused, but something closer to understanding, mixed with a hint of regret. Briggs exhaled, long and controlled, his posture shifting almost imperceptibly, like the ground beneath him had moved just enough to notice. Daniel did not speak. For the first time since Marcus had walked in that morning, he had nothing to say. Marcus adjusted his sleeve once more, that same precise motion, then stepped forward, closing the distance by a single step. Not aggressive, not hesitant, just enough. Because the moment had arrived, and there was no more space left to avoid it. No one spoke. Not because they did not want to, but because the shape of the room had changed and no one knew where to stand inside it anymore. The fluorescent lights hummed above, steady, indifferent, casting the same cold glow on everyone, but nothing felt the same. Marcus held his position, one step forward, shoulders relaxed, gaze level. Not asserting, not retreating, just present. Briggs shifted his weight slightly, the movement small but heavy, like he was recalibrating something that had always been fixed before. Command authority, he repeated under his breath, not questioning the words, but what they meant now, here, in this room, in this moment. Daniel let out a slow breath, his jaw tightening as his eyes moved from Marcus to Briggs, then back again, searching for direction that was no longer as clear as it had been an hour ago. So what? Daniel said finally, voice lower, stripped of its earlier edge. This is some kind of test. The question hung there, not confrontational, but uncertain, like he was trying to find solid ground in a space that kept shifting under him. Marcus looked at him, really looked this time, not as a rookie, not as an outsider, but as someone measuring something deeper. It is an assignment, Marcus said. Calm, direct, no extra weight. The words settled into the silence, heavier than they sounded. Across the room, the older officer lowered himself slowly back into his chair, the paper still in his hand, but now resting against his knee, like he had already accepted what it meant even if he did not fully understand it yet. A chair rolled quietly somewhere in the background, then stopped. No one else moved. Briggs straightened slightly, his voice coming back, controlled but changed. And when were you planning to share that? He asked. Not accusing. Not exactly. But not neutral either. Marcus did not answer right away. He let the question sit, the same way he had let every other moment unfold without forcing it. Then he spoke. When it mattered. The same words as before. But now they carried something different. Briggs nodded once, slow, almost reluctant, like he recognized the logic even if he did not like the position it put him in. Daniel looked down briefly, then back up, something quieter now behind his eyes, something closer to reflection than resistance. The room held that silence again, but it was no longer empty. It was full of recognition, of shifts happening in real time. Marcus reached up, adjusting his sleeve one more time. That same precise motion that had gone unnoticed before, but now felt deliberate, intentional. A marker of control, of presence. He took a breath, slow and even, then stepped past Briggs, not brushing against him, not asserting space, just moving forward like it was always his to walk through. No one stopped him. No one spoke. The path opened without being asked for. Daniel turned slightly as Marcus passed, watching him in a way he had not before, not with judgment, but with something unsettled, something that had not yet found its place. Marcus reached the center of the room, then paused, just for a moment, long enough for everyone to feel it. Then he turned back, his gaze sweeping across the room once, taking in every face, every expression that had shifted since the morning. And in that quiet, steady look, there was no anger, no satisfaction, just clarity, the kind that did not need to be spoken to be understood. You missed something. The voice came from the back, not loud, but enough to pull every eye away from Marcus and toward Daniel. He had stepped forward without realizing it, one hand resting on the edge of the desk, the other hanging at his side like he was holding onto a thought he could not quite let go of. The room stilled again, tension shifting direction, no longer centered on revelation, but on resistance. Marcus did not turn immediately. He let the words sit, the same way he had let every moment unfold since he walked in. Then slowly he faced him. Daniel's jaw was tight, but his voice, when it came again, was steadier. If this is an assignment, he said, then there are procedures. Protocols. You do not just walk in and watch people without saying something. The words were not wrong. That was what made them heavier. Briggs glanced between them. His expression unreadable now, but his posture had changed again, less rigid, more observant, like he was no longer leading the room, just trying to understand it. Marcus stepped closer, not enough to crowd, just enough to close the space that had been filled with assumption all morning. "You are right," he said. "Calm. Direct." Daniel blinked once, caught slightly off guard by the agreement. "Then why wait?" he asked. Marcus held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Because what people do when they think no one is watching matters more than what they say when they know they are." Silence followed. Not tense this time. Just quiet. The kind that forced people to sit with something instead of talking over it. Daniel's eyes shifted, just briefly, like something in that answer had landed deeper than he expected. He looked away for a second, then back again, searching for something to push against, something to hold on to. "So what now?" he asked. The question was different. Not defensive, not challenging, just real. Marcus took a slow breath, the movement subtle but grounding, then turned slightly, addressing not just Daniel, but the room. "Now," he said, voice still even, "we continue." A few heads tilted, uncertain. Briggs crossed his arms, but not in the same way as before, not to assert control, but to contain his own thoughts. "Continue what?" he asked. Marcus's eyes moved across the room, taking in each face again, the laughter from earlier replaced now with something quieter, something closer to reflection. "The job," Marcus replied. Simple, uncomplicated, but it landed with weight. The older officer in the chair nodded slightly, almost to himself, like he understood something the others were still catching up to. Daniel exhaled, longer this time, tension leaving his shoulders in a way it had not all day. He looked down at his hands, then back up at Marcus, something shifting behind his eyes, something less certain, but more honest. "And if we get it wrong?" he asked. Marcus met his gaze, not with authority, not with judgment, but with something steadier. "Then we fix it," he said. No pause, no hesitation. The room held that answer, the simplicity of it cutting through everything that had built up before. No speeches, no corrections, just that. Marcus adjusted his sleeve one more time, then turned back toward the center of the room, the same calm presence he had carried since the beginning, but now understood differently by everyone watching. And for the first time that day, no one laughed, no one questioned, and no one looked away. The room did not return to normal. It shifted into something quieter, more deliberate, like every movement now carried weight it did not have before. Chairs rolled softer. Voices stayed lower. Even the radios seemed to crackle with less urgency, as if the space itself had decided to listen instead of react. Marcus moved back toward his station, not claiming anything, not announcing anything, just continuing, exactly as he said he would. The screen flickered on, casting a pale glow across his hands as he pulled up the report again, scanning it with the same steady focus as before. No change in pace, no change in posture, but everything around him had changed. Daniel remained where he stood for a moment longer, watching, his expression caught somewhere between resistance and realization. Then slowly, he exhaled and walked back to his desk, picking up his keys, setting them down again, the small metallic sound no longer sharp, just present. He glanced at the report screen from a distance, then looked away, like he was choosing not to interrupt something he had not understood earlier. Briggs moved next, stepping toward the center of the room, his authority still there, but quieter now, less imposed, more measured. "We have paperwork to finish," he said, voice controlled, but not commanding in the same way. It sounded different. It felt different. A few officers nodded, returning to their stations, but the rhythm was slower, more aware, like each action was being reconsidered in real time. The older officer folded the printed sheet carefully, placing it on his desk with more care than necessary, then looked toward Marcus again, his gaze no longer searching for answers, but acknowledging something already clear. Marcus finished reviewing the report, then added a single line, precise, deliberate, correcting something small but important. He saved the file and leaned back slightly, not relaxed, just complete. Daniel approached, stopping a few feet away, not too close, not distant either. "You changed the phrasing," he said, nodding toward the screen. Marcus glanced at him briefly. "It needed clarity," he replied. Daniel studied the line for a second, then nodded once. "It does," he said quietly. No sarcasm, no challenge, just agreement. The moment lingered, small but significant, like a crack in something that had seemed solid before. Briggs watched from across the room, arms at his sides now, not crossed, not guarded, just observing, taking in the shift not as a threat, but as something he needed to understand moving forward. The radio called out another routine update, the voice steady, familiar, grounding. Marcus stood, adjusting his sleeve once more, that same precise motion, then reached for his jacket. The room followed him without meaning to, eyes tracking not the authority he carried, but the consistency of it, the way it had been there from the beginning, just unnoticed. He paused for a moment, looking across the room, not to assess, not to judge, but to recognize. Daniel met his eyes, just for a second, and this time, he did not look away first. There was no smirk, no edge, just something quieter, something closer to respect, though neither of them said it. Marcus nodded once, subtle, then turned toward the hallway. And as he walked, no one stopped him, no one questioned him, and no one laughed. Because the room had learned something it could not unlearn, not through force, not through correction, but through presence. And that kind of change did not make noise. It stayed. The hallway felt quieter than the room he had just left, the sound of his footsteps softened by the long strip of worn carpet leading toward the offices at the back. Marcus walked without urgency, jacket resting over his arm, his pace unchanged, but the air around him carried a different weight now. Behind him, the bullpen continued, but it no longer sounded the same. Voices were lower, movements more deliberate. Something had settled into the walls that would not easily leave. He reached the end of the hall and stopped in front of the glass door marked Command Office. The lettering was simple, clean, final. He stood there for a second, not hesitating, not doubting, just acknowledging the line between what had been assumed and what was now clear. Then he opened the door. Inside, the room was still, untouched by the noise outside. A desk sat centered beneath a wide window, the late afternoon light stretching across its surface in long, golden lines. Papers were stacked neatly, a chair positioned precisely, everything in place. Waiting. Marcus stepped in, the door closing softly. Behind him, sealing the quiet. He set his jacket over the back of the chair, smoothing it once with a careful hand, then rested his palms lightly on the edge of the desk. For a moment, he did nothing else. No movement, no sound, just breath. In, out, grounded. Then he sat. The chair shifted slightly under his weight, a small sound in a room that held on to every detail. He reached forward, straightening a stack of papers that did not need straightening, aligning the edges with a precision that mirrored everything he had done since walking into the station that morning. Control, not over others, over himself. A soft knock broke the stillness. Marcus looked up. Come in. The door opened just enough for Briggs to step inside, his presence filling the space differently here, less imposing, more contained. He closed the door behind him, the click quieter than usual. For a second, neither of them spoke. Briggs took in the room, then Marcus, then the chair behind the desk. His jaw tightened, but not with resistance. With adjustment. You could have said something earlier, Briggs said finally, voice low, not accusing, just honest. Marcus leaned back slightly, hands resting on the armrests, posture relaxed but grounded. Would it have changed anything? He asked. Briggs did not answer right away. His eyes shifted, just briefly, like he was replaying the day in his head, every moment, every assumption. Then he exhaled. Probably not, he admitted. The truth of it settled between them, quiet but solid. Marcus nodded once, acknowledging not just the answer, but the understanding behind it. That is why I waited, he said. No emphasis. No explanation beyond that. Briggs stepped further into the room, stopping just short of the desk. The distance felt different now. Not hierarchical, just measured. So what happens now, he asked. The question came without edge, without challenge. Just real. Marcus's gaze held steady. Now we do the job, he said. The same words as before. But here, they carried something deeper. Something that reached beyond the room, beyond the moment, into everything that had been set in motion. Briggs nodded slowly, absorbing it, then straightened slightly, the shift subtle but meaningful. Understood, he said. He turned toward the door, then paused, his hand resting on the handle. For a second, he looked back, not at the badge, not at the desk, but at Marcus himself. Then he gave a small nod. Respect. Quiet. Unspoken. And he left. The door closed again, soft, final. Marcus remained still for a moment, then turned his gaze toward the window. Outside, the sky had begun to dim, the lights softening, stretching into evening. The city moved on, unaware of the shift that had taken place inside a single room. Marcus adjusted his sleeve one more time, that same precise motion, then rested his hands on the desk, steady, grounded. Not because he needed to prove anything, but because this was where he had always been walking toward, long before anyone else noticed. The light outside had softened into a quiet blue, the kind that settled over the city when the day had nothing left to prove. Inside the office, Marcus sat still, hands resting on the desk, the hum of the building distant now, like it belonged to another place. He did not rush to fill the silence. He let it stay, because silence, when it was honest, carried more than noise ever could. A faint knock came again, lighter this time. Marcus looked up. "Come in." The door opened slowly, and Daniel stepped in, not with the same certainty he carried that morning, but not hesitant either. Just different. He closed the door behind him, the sound soft, almost careful. For a moment, he did not speak. His eyes moved across the room, then settled on Marcus, taking in the desk, the chair, the space that had shifted meaning in a single day. "I was wrong," Daniel said finally. No build-up, no defense, just the words. They hung there, simple, unprotected. Marcus did not respond immediately. He watched him, not evaluating, not judging, just present. Daniel exhaled slowly, like he had been holding something in for longer than he realized. "Not just about you," he added, his voice steadier now, but quieter. "About how I saw everything." Marcus leaned back slightly, the chair giving a soft creak beneath him. "What changed?" he asked. The question was not a challenge. It was an opening. Daniel looked down for a second, then back up, his gaze clearer now. "Nothing," he said. Then after a pause, "That is the problem." The answer settled between them, deeper than explanation. Marcus nodded once, understanding without needing more. The room held that moment, not as tension, but as recognition. Daniel shifted his weight, then reached up and unclipped his badge, holding it for a second, feeling its weight in his hand. He did not place it down. Not yet. He just looked at it, then back at Marcus. "I do not know how to fix all of it," he said. Honest, uncertain, real. Marcus's expression did not change, but something in his gaze softened, just enough to be felt. "Start with the next decision," he said. "No lecture. No list. Just that." Daniel nodded slowly, the words landing in a place that would stay. He clipped the badge back onto his uniform, the motion deliberate this time, then straightened slightly, not with pride, but with intention. He turned toward the door, then paused, his hand resting on the handle. For a second, he looked back. "You could have made this a lot harder," he said. Marcus met his eyes, calm as ever. "I did not need to." A small silence followed. Then Daniel gave a single nod. Respect. Earned, not forced. And he left. The door closed quietly behind him, leaving the room exactly as it had been, but not the same. Marcus turned his gaze back to the window, the city lights beginning to flicker on one by one, small points of brightness in the growing dark. He adjusted his sleeve one last time, that same precise motion, then rested his hands on the desk, steady, grounded. He had not raised his voice. He had not demanded anything. He had not forced change. But something had changed. Not the system, not the world, just a room, just a few people, just enough. And sometimes, that was where it began.